Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 3, Episode 8 of You. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, we are picking up with the conversation of, hey, maybe we should have an open relationship. And Joe's all about it because it's that thing of like, man, I don't want to be with my wife anymore. So opening ourselves up to an open relationship, most likely because he's like, oh yeah, I skipped over it in a part of the book so love wouldn't notice. But more likely this is the end of a relationship, and actually going into a open relationship situation like this might actually put an end to your marriage, which he's actually hoping for. It's like, yeah, God, let me just do this one last thing with my wife so I can finally get rid of, a good old ball and chain so I can be with the one I really love marrying. It's like, I did not realize this story would take this turn. Because truth be told is like, I talked about it early on in the season. I thought Natalie would have been like probably the overarching thing, but it's like Natalie was the thing, but then it's like moved on to, oh no, I'm gonna fix things with love. We're in a good place. I knew it wouldn't last. It's like they fixed the relationship in episode 2. Like, well, they were going to therapy in episode 2, and that's where they kind of really, like, hit their stride. I'm like, there's no way you're just, like, your relationship is okay just after episode 2. Like, you got a whole 8 more episodes for things to go wrong. And lo and behold, they've gone wrong so far. But it's like, yeah, he went on and found someone else past his wife, and that's Marion. So, developments I didn't see coming, and I just think that just shows always keeping you on your toes. But Joe's just hoping to make things kind of an easy thing of just like set up to make this happen. And I love that he's like, right, I got to play a little coy. She's got to be like, are you okay with it? And I'm like, well, and kind of I have to lead her on. And well, she's not feeling it so much, so I got to pull back a little bit because basically he wants this to be in the end of his marriage. But she has her reservations about it. So he speaks in just the right way, says all the right stuff just to kind of lead her on. Little by little, he's trying to like edge her there closer to it. I even love later on, it's like, right, she's about to try to like revive that spark, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, babe, I'm so tired. She's like, oh, I know, I'm so boring. And he's like, no, it's not that. It's just, I'm just working. I'm like, he's such a manipulative bastard. I mean, to be fair, we've known this about Joe since day 1 of the show, how much a manipulative bastard he is. But still, like, it's just like, oh, doing it to your own wife. Especially because getting to this point, because this is supposed to be opening the doorway to happily ever after, because he's always assumed, like, happily ever after, it didn't end up going the way he thought it would. So this is supposed to be his happily ever after, but his happily ever after isn't going to come until he's with Marion. I mean, but also, like, circling back to it, like, there is a neat parallel between them where it's like, neither one of them is happy with their current circumstances, and they're like, we should be happy, I should be happy. Because actually, Joe got her talking about James a little bit, because she's like, they had their own plans and everything, and she's like, James never knew what he wanted, because she was like, yeah, we were young at the time, and, like, she wanted a baby, and so I love that it's, I forgot what she was saying, like, oh, no, it's something, and then, like, Joe was like, oh, yeah, you almost definitely were responsible for murdering your first husband, so he's just kind of solidified in his mind who love is. And, obviously later on they try to meet up with Carrie and Sherry about, it's like, right, what if something was happening between Love and Sherry? It's like, well, that's fine. What about Love and Carrie? And it's like, and he has to be like, well, I trust you. And like, once again, he's like, I don't care. You'd be almost like, he's like, you're almost doing me a favor, but I have to play it up like the doting husband. Like, okay, I'm doing this only because you're comfortable with it, babe. But it's like, oh, what about you and Carrie? And it's like, well, and I was like, oh, let's see. And Carrie's like, oh yeah, like, he's like, most people aren't too, I forgot what he was saying, but he was basically like, oh, he's like, being a bisexual man, he's like, yeah, it's kind of like, essentially, it's like, it's fucking awesome. And Joe's like, well, I can, I'm open-minded. I can be open-minded, so. But when it comes down to the situation of, what about me and Joe, like Sherry and Joe immediately was like, she's going to be no, but Love is like, yes. And she's almost like, wait, why'd you say no? Because Tupi Totis is like, he knows how jealous you can get. Hence the Natalie situation, which kind of set all this, like, in motion. So there's that element to it. But, it's like, well, you have to get your priorities straight, because they also, like, have contracts, NDAs that you have to sign, just so, like, it doesn't, like, threatened like that, because this is stuff that it's like, right, what we do in our, it should be private, but what you do in your private life sadly can be immunized against you. And it's like, right, so let's keep this, the fact that you're having to sign contracts, but it's like, yeah, everyone apparently kind of lives this sort of lifestyle. So it makes you wonder, like, how many people in this town have, like, they, like, hooked up with. Like, I'm not saying they hooked up with everyone. You also notice, too, like, as the series progresses, this season has progressed. I don't know why I said it weird like that. As this season has progressed, Sherry's spending less and less time around her cronies. We don't see them as much anymore. Like, the main person she's hanging around all the time is Love, because Love and her, in a weird way, never would have thought it would happen, inadvertently became besties, because, like, this no longer was an act anymore. Like, it was, like, Love was all about this life, and, so she kind of started adapting to it, like, as Joe kind of brought up a couple episodes back, but it's just something interesting I didn't really notice until now. I was like, right, she's her user momfluencer self, but she's not as insufferable. Like I said, like, we got to see, like, some real sides of her before that I think kind of, like, opened up, like, oh, Sherry's not as bad. I think there's kind of, like, there's something there, so. But obviously the contract and everything, it's like, right, come check us out when you guys are kind of on the same page. At the same time, Joe ended up. Side note, I'm surprised. I never noticed this until this episode. I was like, huh. I think I'm just completely oblivious. I didn't realize Dante's blind until he pulled out his camera. I was like, wait. I was like, because I noticed he was looking in a different direction. I was like, wait, what? I was like, oh, I completely missed that character was blind. I was like, holy crap. Because there were moments where it's like, oh yeah, like, there are Braille sections too, which I'm like, yeah, I mean, of course there would be Braille sections in the library, but it just never correlated. Because I'm sure there might, a library needs to have, like, a Braille section for just anyone that's blind, but I like I said, because now in retrospect, I want to look back and go, like, because I did notice, like, during, like, that party last episode, he did, like, have, like, a cane or something, but I thought it was part of his costume. I didn't think, like, oh, it was like a scene cane, like, so he can, like, tap and see what's in, like, for what's in front of him. I was like, that blew my mind. I was like, oh, I didn't know he was blind. I mean, maybe it was actually pretty obvious. I just never noticed it until, but I considering the thing of, like, what he was doing, like, not looking straight on, I was like, because that's why I was like, oh, that looks, because I never noticed it before until that particular scene, and then, like, he walks away with his cane. I was like, oh my god. I know I'm getting, like, oh, look, it's not that big of a deal, but it's just because, like, I never noticed that. I was like, man, like, was I completely oblivious to that? That's fascinating that I just completely missed that. I mean, not fascinating, but still, it was just, huh. But regardless, Joe submitted one of Marion's books, which obviously the editor of one of, like, a whole bunch of her favorite books, Amy, she was like, dude, I'm all up, like, Marion's, like, super excited about it. Granted, she doesn't like that Joe did that, but Joe's like, I knew you would beat yourself up about it. And she's like, just because he's like, no, this is just me acting as a friend, wanting to do something to help you out. But at the same time, she was like, she appreciated what Joe did, So she was able to celebrate it, but granted, there's still the whole Ryan situation, coming to pick up their daughter. And it's like, obviously, Marion's like, I know he's planning something, I just don't know what. Because later on, Dante kind of runs her through some of the stuff. Because he's, like, being harsh on her, because he's like, right, I know what it's like. Because it took him, like, 3 years to adopt his significant other's children as, like, to be, like, it's like a whole process you have to go through in his own right. So it's like, I know, like, how, like, all the loopholes and the, like, convolutedness of the law, how it would kind of screw you over. He's just trying to prepare Marion for it. So, but Marion wants Joe to be there as kind of a character witness, and they kind of have their moment, their little spark, but it's like, no, we can't let anything happen, right? So Love is trying to spice things up at home so that her and Joe are on the right page, and she's kind of like lifting up the dress and everything. Lo and behold, who comes over? Theo, being like, oh, that's quite the invitation. She's like, oh, Joe's sleeping. Oh, wait, I got this tag. Joe's actually awake now. And Theo's like, yeah, because he's over there watching us. And then Joe's just kind of like, and I love that Theo's like, huh, creep show, and he's putting on a smile and everything. I was like, you're such a little shit. It's like, you're the one coming over here trying to bang someone else's wife. What are you doing? Talking about, oh, creep show, how you're just standing like, yeah, because he knows something's up. Like, that's why I was like, what do you have? You had the nerve to talk about some creep show. you little snot-nosed brat. I say that as someone, like, because he's like, what? His character's supposed to be 18 as a 29-year-old. I feel like I'm at that point in my age where I can go, you snot-nosed brat? I mean, to be fair, I've been saying that before, and like when it comes to teenage, because like, oh, teenagers suck, especially around that age. I remember being a shitty teenager. But it's just like, yeah, it's just like the audacity. You're up here like checking out his wife thinking it's an invitation for you, but like Joe has to pretend like he cares, but it's like, I mean, to him, even he's like, yeah, is this really happening in front of me? He doesn't care. It's like, right, it doesn't mean anything to me. So when the time comes, it's like he plays into it a little bit more and trying to pretend like it bothers him and goes down on love. And it's like, satisfy her, but leave her hungry. I'm like, yo! He's like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing. And it's like, wow. So it's like, right, we're rock solid. Are we ready? Yeah, let's make this happen. Let's do it. So they are, we get ready for our threesome, which is amazing. Like, they come over, they are, like, I love that Carrie comes in with a whole bunch of cases, and, like, Joe's like, what are they do? Are you moving in? Like, what's going on? And he's kind of terrified as, like, Carrie's talking about, oh, where's your bedroom so we can set it up? It's like, okay, this is crazy, this is weird. So, some dancing's involved, and, Carrie shows to Joe, like, his concoctions. He's like, yeah, I KO'd a couple times before I found the right dosage for this. So it's like, yeah, here's a little pill. And he's like, well, I'm going to need this if I'm going to have to fake it. Because he's like, most likely, like, it's not just about being, like, getting it up in front of love. It's also like, right, going to have sex with Sherry, even though, like, I can't stand it, rather die, but has no choice. And I love that, like, I just love that Carrie's like, you can look at it. Look at my dick. And just, like, Joe looks down real quick and looks back up. And then, like, Carrie, like, you know, it's like, right, if you can't, like, what was it, like, essentially it's like, if you can't love yourself, but if you can't fuck yourself, then, like, why would anyone else want to? So he's standing in front of a mirror jacking off, and then, like, Joe is just kind of like, oh, okay, so he's leaving. And I just love that he was like, no phones, and finish. And even tell Joe later on, hey, man, you missed the finale. It's like, oh, wow. But he's talking to Marion, and it's like, it turns out that those photos that Joe found of Marion at Ryan's place, he like sent that out to all of her contacts, even to Amy, the editor that was like looking into like her story, you know, for like to see whether she'll, you know, win or not. And so he's trying to obviously sabotage everything in her life. So obviously she's stressed out and she's worried, but Joe is promising obviously to be there, and like obviously we're gonna, like, you know, you're gonna come out of this victorious, it's all gonna work out. And obviously Marion's like, do you want to come over? And I was like, is he gonna try and warm his way up? It's like, nah, like for this all to play out so that he can be with Marion, he needs this all to go down so that he can his marriage can both implode and explode, just so that he can get out of it. Because the whole point is like, right, I need to ease my way out of this relationship. I need to make it so that love wants to leave me. That way she's less likely to come after me and try and kill me like I believe she killed her first husband. We'll have to find out whether that, I mean, because that might be on some very like, I married an axe murderer type of thing. It's, you know, because that, if you're unaware, that's kind of the plot where Mike Myers gets with Nancy Travis because he believes that, like, she's had, I don't know if it's like one or multiple previous husbands that have just mysteriously died. And so I think other people start putting it in his head that, like, she might have murdered her husband. It's like a Black Widow type of situation. I don't remember. I referenced that recently. Oh, yeah, like, I think it was in correlation to, was it this? It might have been in correlation to this that I referenced, so I married an axe murderer. Oh yeah, because I think I referenced the fact is because Love literally had an axe when she kills Natalie. So I think it was this specifically that I referenced that in like my thoughts and theories for season 3. I think that's what Joe's thinking along those lines, but I don't think she actually was responsible. It'd be interesting if we end up finding out like Dottie's actually the one that killed James and just starts trying to paint a picture of Love. We'll see. It might just be like no, Love did do it. To be fair, it's not like Joe hasn't been above killing his significant others. It's like, it's really weird for you to kind of play that role considering like, well, you did kill Beck. I mean, well, and I was about to say like, you did think you killed Candace, but you know, it's like you got some depths under your belt. So especially like, don't make it like, that's the hypocrisy of it. It's like, yeah, Love may have killed her husband, but like, you killed your girlfriend because she turned on you. Well, you killed 2 girlfriends. Once again, attempted to murder one, but you definitely killed another one. So that's what I'm like, the hypocrisy is there. Like, once again, I think it just is in that vein of just like Joe can't see himself. Like, there's a lot of self-actualization, a lot of like realization is the word I meant to say. Like, there's a lot of self-realization, that a lot of growth that Joe's had over the course of the series, but I still think there's such a thing of like, he can look at love in a negative light, and I feel like he just can't bring himself to necessarily turn the light on himself. In certain regards, yes, but he almost makes it seem like, oh, it's all love is pushing me to end up being the worst version of myself. I can be the best version of me. There could be a happily ever after waiting for me if I get with Marion, which I'm like, I don't see that happening, but we'll see how the rest of the season plays out. But nevertheless, I went on a huge tangent, and it's like, well, it's sexy time, and so Joe and Sherry do their thing, and it's like, right, he has to get it up, so it's like, right, just keep an eye on your partner, and partway through it, he's thinking about Marion, and Sherry starts riding him, and Love is into it until she looks at Joe, and she sees, like, him, like, not looking at her. He closed his eyes, and I think that was enough for her to be like, you're thinking about someone else, and that's when she was like, Hakuna Matata, because that's her safe word, which I love that you had Joe being like, I hope Disney sues them. Obviously, just in interesting timing. Like, obviously, there was these lines were probably written forever ago. But, I mean, it's a large corporation suing. It's not that big of a deal, but it's just like it's funny. Just that my mind's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's just Disney suing. It's just funny to me. Just interesting timing with recent events and stuff like that. That's all I'm kind of saying. But Love immediately recognized, like, I know you enough, Joe. Like, who are you thinking about? And it's like, everything I've done is because of you. Like, I'm a mother 24/7. A wife, got to run a successful bakery and stuff like that. It's just like, I'm doing all these things, and I killed Natalie. I killed Natalie because of you. And Joe's like, shut up. And it's like, they hear it's quiet, and then the music turns on, and it's like, shit. Did they hear us? I don't know. And it's like, well, go out there. If Sherry's scratching her arm, that means she's lying. So I was like, all right. And they're going up there, and like, you got to give it up to them. Sherry and Carrie were like playing the hell out of that scene, and then Sherry starts reaching for her arm, and it's like, oh, it's over now. And it's like, go. Carrie bolts for it, and Joe goes after him, and Sherry and Love's like, we can work around this. So it turned. I even love that, like, they're trying to get to the phones. Luckily, Joe was able to break the phones and keep them away from Carrie. It also turns into an Archer situation a little bit later on. I love Joe's like, I'm going to get impaled. Love is going to go to prison, and Henry's going to be part of the foster system, which obviously, like, he doesn't want that, considering his experiences in it too. It's like, never see our child again. No, that's not going to happen. So he arrows Carrie, knocks him out with a rock, doesn't kill him, but then comes back in, and lo and behold, there's him and Love matching eyes, and it's like, cool. And they make their way to the bakery and lock them in, and it's like, wow, we're here again. Well, man, it feels like almost yesterday. Granted, that was a while back, but it almost feels like yesterday that we had Gil in here. But then Joe and Love proceed to have sex, because this was like the biggest, like, oh yeah. And I love Joe saying, like, this was like, because like Love was like, that was great. That was like the best sex we ever had. He was like, yeah, it was. I figured that he's like, me and Love, our love language is violence. It's like, Jesus Christ. And it's like, yeah, the whole threesome, like, the worst threesome ever, in a weird way, technically made their relationship stronger, at least on the Love side of things. But I think even on Joe, because he starts thinking about it, it's like, oh, he hasn't really given into the thought of, like, oh, still staying with Love. But it's like, oh, it just made Love love him that much more. But even Love is kind of upset, because it's like, right, I had to lock my best friend. Like I say, her even saying it in terms of, like, yeah, Sherry is her bestie, so. There's also the other side of things where you had Theo trying to get his dad out of the house. Like, obviously he calls the brown out, so like the lights would go off and the Wi-Fi would go out, and so his dad would leave the room. And so There was this moment I thought was interesting where, like, his dad's asking about him. He's like, oh, you want this and that? Oh, you want to, like, he's like, oh, maybe you should, like, clear your head because, like, sleeping in that room isn't, like, healthy for you, Dad. So, like, maybe you should go a walk and clear your head. And he's like, oh, would you like to join me? And you could see Theo having to fight back to be like, yeah, no, like, I'm hungry. But he's like, oh, I could pick you up something for, because he was almost jumping for it. He's like, I was like, oh my God, yeah, I'll help you out, Dad. Like, I'll go with you, Dad. Like, because he wants to spend time with Matthew, and that was a golden opportunity. But he owes it to Love to, like, no, I have to look into it. It's not like I wanted to go, but I can't. It's like, no, he really wanted to, but he had to pull himself back because that's exactly what he wanted, was more quality time and more openness with Matthew. But he had to, like, no, he got to keep his promise to Love. So he looks into it, and we see, like, one of the videos he's looking, because he's focusing on Love and Joe now. Now, he feels like, yeah, there's something up with Love, but more so than anything, it's like Joe's anger. It's like he's got some anger issues, and so it's like you're spying on them. And because it's like, yeah, because now you're mixed up with Love Quinn, the same woman that was the last person to be with Natalie, and now you're getting mixed up, and it's like, what are you doing? And he, like, you know, it's the yelling back and forth about, you know, like, you know, you have Matthew calling him a spoil, like calling him a fucking brat, getting mixed up in all of this. And obviously for Theo, it's like, you're acting crazy. Like, what do you, like, at the end of it all, it's like, Natalie's dead. Like, none of this is going to bring her back. And it pisses Matthew off, because rather than having his son's support, it's like, you're thinking I'm just crazy, which, yeah, he's sleep deprived. He's doing everything to stay awake. He's going very manic. He's obsessed with this. Now, it's unclear what was it about Gil's suicide note, this whole situation. Whether it's just a thing of, there's no way Natalie would take interest in someone like Gil. I don't know what it is, because we never actually found out what was it that made him go, there's something weird with this situation. But now it's, you know, whatever the case may be, it's come down to this. And he's definitely suspicious of Joe and Love, to the point that he's looking at the Joe cleaning out the bed. He's like, oh yeah, she spilled some fruit juice and stuff like that. He's like, oh yeah, sure. And he's like, what was all that sound? And he's like, well, we had, the Conrads. So yeah, they were here for a sec. And it's like, oh, that I just want her to scream. Yeah, you know. And it's like, oh yeah, you and Love, you have a lot of fun, don't you? And he's drinking, and you're like, yeah, he's really suspicious of you guys. So whether he knows, like, Love did it, whether he thinks Joe did it, whether it's like Love did it but Joe covered, or whether Joe did it and Love, who knows? I'm curious. Like, we get some understandings of, like, what's going on in Matthew's head right now, but not a full view. So it is a situation that Joe, because it's interesting, because even for a moment Joe did start seeing the Love that he loved, like the one that was wild and everything, the Love he, like, fell for in season 2 before he found out who she really was. So he sees sparks and moments of that. He's seen that throughout the season, and that kind of keeps him holding on. But obviously Love's worried about, you know, everything now. And so ultimately it's like, what are we going to do? We're going to play good cop, bad cop. It's like, right, you go down there because he's got to keep his appointment with Marion. And apparently everything went good in court. Sadly, it turns out Ryan is good buddies with the judge, so the system is rigged. And so for Joe, it's like, right, nothing's ever going to work out for Marion as long as he's in the picture. So Joe's probably going to take some active action with that. Now, I'm assuming all these storylines are going to converge into conveniently helping out with that. Like, what if something happens to Carrie and Sherry? Maybe you can tie that into the Natalie thing, but maybe that gets tied in with Matthew's suspicions of Joe and Love, and how Ryan might fit into that narrative, because Joe's already got to deal with those two, plus he wants to get rid of Ryan because he needs to for Marion's sake, so that she can get her daughter. But yeah, it's like, at the end, it's like, right, so Carrie and Sherry are awake, and now it's like, Joe's like, now how do they find a way out of this alive? Because obviously things didn't work out well for Gil. Granted, that wasn't on them, that was kind of on him, but they kind of put him in that situation to kill himself. But it's like, and I don't see Sherry and Carrie doing that. For one, they're too narcissistic to do something like that. And I don't know if there's enough dirt for you to get them, like, I don't know. There's too much there. I don't think they'd be someone that you can blackmail like they can with Gil. So it's like, there's almost like no, at least for currently, doesn't seem like there's any other way around it but killing them, because you can't let them go, and because you definitely can't, potentially doesn't seem like you can blackmail them. We'll have to wait and see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Only 2 episodes left in this season, so it's going to be wild to see what happens next. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.